Chapter 11. The Other Way Out. Down the cliff they scrambled again, down and down toward the river brink. It was a perilous journey, but they achieved it. On some particularly difficult ledges, they had to use each other's tails as mountaineers use ropes. One of them held on tight while the other slid down. Then the one below made a back for the one above, or even caught him as he jumped. Down they went and down, first scraped, tails aching, and at last stood gasping but triumphant upon the heap of jumbled stone. "What did I tell you?" panted Nils. There was a water gate all right. Up under a cavernous stone arch, cut stone, rose a flight of granite steps that disappeared into the gloom above, and in the buttress to one side was even an old iron mooring ring. But how well had the river done its work? Were those steps still blocked higher up? Exhausted as they were, the mice had to know. At least it was easier going up than coming down, though the steps would normally have been too high even for tail work. The river, retreating, had washed down ramps of sand and small stone against either wall. Nils and Bernard slipped a bit on wet mud and shreds of waterweed, but otherwise made good progress, and with each step past felt their hearts lift. It looked as though the whole flight was clear. As so indeed it proved, right up to the top, where a high rusty gate lolled half fallen from its hinges. Even a man could have squeezed by. Bernard and Nils, of course, simply ran between the bars. Where were they now? "We're still pretty deep down in the castle," said Bernard. "Aye, at dungeon level," said Nils. Before them stretched the long, narrow passage cut from the rock itself. For a moment, they thought it was the corridor where the jailer with the food pans came to let down the prisoners' food. But there were no grids in its floor. The floor was solid rock, too. Nils and Bernard ran up and down twice to make sure. So was one wall solid rock, but in the other was a row of iron doors. Dungeon doors. "And there's another door, don't you see, at the end?" cried Nils. To bring the prisoners in by. At last it was clear, what the mice had never been able to discover, how the prisoners were got into their cells. Small wonder, too, that the jailers weren't aware of the river's work. Until a new prisoner arrived, they had no reason to enter this corridor at all. And as if to confirm all speculation, at that very moment sounded a jailer's boots stamping overhead, accompanied by the clank of food pans. Nils and Bernard, by listening intently, could hear the grids creak up, one after the other, behind and above each iron door. "All we need now," said Nils, "is the key. I see it all," he exclaimed excitedly. "We get hold of the key, drop it through the grid, jump down ourselves, and all escape together by the water gate. All we need now is the right key." In Bernard's opinion, the splendid plan had still a lot of loose ends. How are they to get the key? But he refrained from saying so. Indeed, it touched him to the heart to see Nils now run from sill to sill, attempting in vain to call beneath some Norwegian word of hope. The doors were set in solid rock. No voice of mouse could possibly penetrate. "Come on back, old fellow," urged Bernard, not unsympathetically, just practically. "Now is the time, if there ever was one, for proper planning. Come on back to Miss Bianca and let's think." It was a desperate, perilous journey again, first down the steps to the water gate, then up and up the cliff, and up again over the castle walls. Again, the dauntless mice achieved it. Bernard was as dauntless as Sir John Hunt, and Nils as Sir Edmund Hillary. The thought of all they had to tell Miss Bianca spurred them on, and though they ached in every limb, they never paused once until they reached the little boss of rock from which they had first peered down. There they allowed themselves a brief rest while they got their breath, and also discussed whether to have a breakfast first and lunch immediately afterwards, or lunch straight away. Then off they set again. They had still a long way to go, but, as Bernard said, the worst was over. He was wrong. Fatigue made them careless. When at last they regained the door of the head jailer's sitting room, they hurried straight in without stopping to reconnoiter, and at that crucial moment, for the first time, met Mameluke face to face. Mameluke was as surprised as they were, but he wasn't tired. For just one instant, they all three stood transfixed. Bernard and Nils foolishly huddled together, then out flashed a cruel black paw and pinned them both to the ground. 2. At the same moment, Miss Bianca peeped out of the hole. She had been worrying all morning, ever since Bernard and Nils weren't there for breakfast. As the hours passed, her anxiety grew. All morning, she had been running to the door to look for their return. Now at the sight that met her eyes, she almost fainted. But she had got out of the habit of fainting, and instead uttered but one piercing shriek of dismay. Mameluke looked around. He grinned with pleasure. From his point of view, the appearance of Miss Bianca was the one thing needed to make the fun complete. "So these are your unsociable friends?" he purred. "Now I shall have sport indeed. Would you like to see me eat them up?" The 3 mice exchanged agonized glances. "Whatever you do, lie still," adjured the glance of Miss Bianca. What Nils and Bernard had to convey was far more complicated, each longed with all his might, before he died, to pass on to Miss Bianca all their discoveries about the river and the water gate and the dungeon doors. It was obviously impossible. She saw only that they had something to convey and of terrific importance. "Ha ha ha," laughed Mameluke. "Come closer, little lady, and watch." He began to shake all over with cruel glee. Nils and Bernard could feel it oozing from his very toes. His grin stretched from ear to ear, revealing every one of his dreadfully sharp teeth and even the wide red gullet behind. Tears of mirth rolled down his whiskers and glistened in his fur like the spangles of Demon King. Miss Bianca had never seen him so terrible as in this fiendish merriment, but she stepped bravely out towards him, summoning all her funds of wit and resourcefulness and feminine cunning. "Which will you eat first?" inquired she. "You can't swallow both at once, you know." "Oh, can't I?" grinned Mameluke. "You just watch me." "I meant, without spoiling your appetite for the midnight feast," explained Miss Bianca hastily. "It is tonight, isn't it?" she added. "The great feast when you eat more than anyone else, and everyone is so astonished at you. Dear me, they'll be astonished in a different way if you're so full of Nils and Bernard you can't manage a bite," said Miss Bianca carelessly. She was being very clever, both in disguising her true feelings and in thus playing on Mameluke's vanity. It wouldn't be half so much fun for him to eat her friends before her eyes if she didn't seem to care about them, while his reputation as Mameluke the Iron Tongue was his greatest pride. He looked uneasily at the mice under his paw. After their months of good living, both Nils and Bernard had put on weight. Either one would have made a square cat meal, and in point of fact, Mameluke was accustomed to eat nothing whatever all that day. "Perhaps you're right," he admitted. "I'll just break their necks and have them tomorrow." "Dear me," said Miss Bianca again. "I thought you considered yourself quite a gourmet. My Persian friend, whom I may have mentioned to you, always told me mice shouldn't be hung even an hour. But I suppose you're forced to live coarsely." Mameluke was stunned. "I don't live coarsely," he shouted. "I live on the fat of the land." "It's so nice to hear you take that view," said Miss Bianca blandly. It shows a truly humble nature. "My Persian friend now." "Nor is my nature humble," shouted Mameluke. "My Persian friend," continued Miss Bianca, "had quite a little witticism on the subject. Fresh-killed mouse, caviar, he used to say. One day old ants' eggs. Of course, if you don't mind eating ants' eggs, which at the embassy we fed to goldfish, I've really no advice to give," said Miss Bianca kindly. "You must do just as you think best." Mameluke was by now thoroughly confused. He didn't want to spoil his appetite for the feast. He didn't want to let Nils and Bernard go, and Miss Bianca had somehow made it seem that if he killed and saved them up, he'd be regarded as a goldfish. For a cat with 2 plump mice under his paw, the situation was really extraordinary. The uncertainty in his mind began to transfer itself to his muscles. Very slightly, the grip of his paw slackened. Bernard and Nils looked at each other, hardly daring to hope. "Or if I might make a suggestion," added Miss Bianca impulsively, "do, as you're dining out, pay a little attention to your coat. You might begin with your back." "What's wrong with my back?" growled Mameluke, confused afresh by the sudden change of subject. "Just look," said Miss Bianca. Vain Mameluke looked. Actually, there was nothing wrong with his back coat at all. He groomed himself rather specially, but he couldn't help looking. Over his shoulder, away from the mice. "Now!" shrieked Miss Bianca. With one instant's terrific effort, Nils and Bernard wrenched themselves free and streaked like lightning for the hole. Miss Bianca skimmed in just ahead of them, and Mama Luke was left fuming outside. 3. Lunch with sausage and sautéed potatoes, followed by treacle sponge, followed by cheese and biscuits. Nils and Bernard decided to cut breakfast after all and just have twice as much of everything. With so much to tell Miss Bianca, they had to talk with their mouths full. She, for her part, was alternately so enthralled by their discoveries and so alarmed at the dangers they had run, she could barely nibble a crumb. What heroism and enterprise, she murmured. Dear Bernard, dear Nils, how warmly I congratulate you. It is you who are the heroine, said Bernard soberly. Without your wonderful coolness and resource, we should neither of us be here now. That's right, agreed Nils. We be a Mama Luke's famous tongue. Miss Bianca shuddered. Pray don't speak of it, she begged, or I really shall faint. Indeed, she added gravely, we must now have no more thoughts of ourselves or of anything else until the prisoner is free. It is positively New Year's Day tomorrow, and how much still remains to be decided? How many obstacles loom still in our way? Oh dear! Suddenly, uncontrollably wept Miss Bianca, a prey to delayed nervous shock, and no wonder, that dreadful, dreadful river! For a moment, they all of them thought about the river. Then there we'll have to swim for it, said Nils heartily. It's the barrens on the other side, he added, that bother me. For a moment, they all thought about the barrens. There we'll have to march for it, said Bernard. Then they all thought about the prisoner, and their courage was renewed. They began to plan in detail what had never been planned before, or, if planned, had never succeeded, the liberation of a prisoner from the Black Castle.